Salam, Namaste, Sat Sri Akal, Adab. This is something you don't want to miss, where we're going to completely look at India from an education perspective. We're going to take us back right into the pre-independence era to 2025 to 2030, and we're going to talk frameworks, we're going to talk institutional challenges, and we're going to talk about largely there are so many unanswered questions I have in my head. I'm in this sector for the last 20 years now. I have two children who are kind of growing up in the education system, and there are answers which I still don't have. Is the system even broken? And how do we even fix that? So we're gonna delve into solutions and not just be critical about it. So this is something I want every parent, every Indian to watch. My next guest, what can I tell you about him? I have been literally stalking him for the last few months, not because for anything adverse. It's just someone who I really look up to for quite some time. He's an educationist, he's an entrepreneur, he's a social activist, known for the last 15 to 17 years as the founder and CEO of Careers 360, a platform focused on providing educational and career guidance to all need-based students in India. But more importantly, he had a fantastic stint with Outlook as the founder and CEO for over 17 years. My definition of education, your definition of education, I think eventually it is the learning ability, right? The learning to think and eventually learning to problem solve. Have we got this right? As a father, as an Indian citizen, I get very hassled looking at the fact that even after 75 years, the entire system is predicated towards an entrance exam, which is completely wrong. Mahesh, welcome to Talk with Kunal Vasudeva.
Thank you so much, Kunal.
I was just, in the brief, of course, I was telling them that I've been stalking you for some time for all the good reasons. I stalk you on LinkedIn, I stalk you wherever you put your reports out there. I have quoted many a times in public discourses, private discourses, internal meetings, the facts and figures that you kind of put out there. And that unlayering of the education facts and figures, you can say I'm one of your consumers.
Thank you so
in
much.
terms of the information that you kind of provide. And thank you for providing that, because it's factual, it's backed with data, it's backed with transparency. So my first, before you even start, right, there is a difference between an activist and an evangelist. I think you were with Outlook an activist then. Of course, last 17, 18 years, you have been an absolutely crusader, I would say, of education, at least in India. And you are an activist. On the other side, I'm an evangelist. I like to believe that. Where did this come from? Is it inherent in you? Does it go back to your college days? Does it go back to your childhood? Where is it?
So first of all, I'm no activist.
Okay.
I refuse to take the badge of an activist because thing is, we have normalized speaking truth to the activism.
True.
Right? But speaking truth is supposed to be normal, isn't it?
True.
Speaking with data, speaking objectively, speaking honestly, speaking transparently, is supposed to be normal.
Yeah.
Somewhere we made that very heroic and very activistic. So I refuse to take that with me, right? Where does it come from? I think most of us, at least me and a lot of people I know, have become where we are, the journey that we had, and how, like today, Careers employs about 400 plus people directly, and maybe 300-400 people indirectly.
Right. I think we are sitting here because someone invested in my education. I don't deserve to be here. My first objective when I studied class 10 was
to write the BSRB examination and be a clerk in bank, and that would be the thing for me. That was the biggest objective I had in my life, right? And then the journey went on, and I'm sitting here employing people instead of being an employee, right? And that is because education. My parents invested in education for me. There was, a lot of public spending in education, which enabled me to pursue education the way it should be. I did CA because there was no fee in that. Every other course had a lot of fee that I can't afford. I did CA because there was no fee, and someone told me there is no fee, and in fact, you in turn, get a stipend out of it. That was the biggest kick for me. So I did that for that purpose. It's a different matter that the journey continued and I succeeded at every single point in time. But education made most of us. If you look at a lot of people who are startup founders or a lot of people in high positions, you'll notice that it is education that brought them there. Like when I launched Career 360, Dr. Singh, Dr. Manmohan Singh and Dr. Kalam launched it, one for Hindi and one for English. And the reason why I chose them is because, first of all, they were the best students in the country.
Absolutely.
And
I've read
they
that
grew because of
about
education and became the most powerful people in the nation. Today, your mate's son and my mate's son can say, listen, I will be more powerful than my mate's employer, which is us, because they believe in education. Education is the single biggest tool of empowerment in a democracy.
Please watch this episode on YouTube. The entire episode is also available on Spotify. We are working on other platforms as well. Give us your feedback. It's extremely important. Engage with us. Help me become a better podcaster. All I can say, I hope the questions that I ask is something you would have asked the guest. Thank you so much. Let's just take that, because I need to kind of unpeel this. My definition of education, your definition of education, I think eventually it will be that universal truth is eventually it is the learning ability, right? The learning to think and eventually learning to problem solve, whether life, professional, business, whatever the case may be. Have we got this right? And I'll tell you where I kind of come from. I'm an eternal optimist, but there are times as a father, as an Indian citizen, I get very hassled looking at the fact that even after 75 years, the entire system is predicated towards an entrance exam.
Which is completely wrong. There is no two ways about it. An entrance exam leans in favor of those people who can afford coaching, have access to coaching,
Absolutely.
and takes you away from the school.
That data point which you put out there on IIT and NEET opened my eyes.
Right.
I think nobody had put it in the perspective that you kind of put it.
Absolutely. Right. And the important thing that we need to understand is, like, for example, you be a child in Delhi in a government school. You are being told to study well and get a good mark. Now what?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Doesn't mean anything whatsoever. You might be the topper of CBSE school in Delhi, but you don't stand a chance unless you crack the CUT examination on the other side.
Let's just pause there.
Yeah.
Why do we have this? When everything is about continuous learning, right, over a spread period of time, and if you ask somebody what is the early predictor of success, is in perseverance and grit over a sustained period of time, right? 40, 50, 60 years, 30 years for some. How can education be counterproductive to where life takes you?
I think it is largely because, policymakers always veer towards transparency than equity, objectivity than fairness. A score which says you getting 99.9 is better than me getting 99.8 is easier to justify for them.
True.
Right. So they're always looking at measures and metrics to say that we have taken a fair decision. We have taken a transparent decision. It might not be fair, it might not be just, it might not be equitable. They don't bother about that. Because this will be questioned, that will not be questioned. But I turn this around and ask a different question to the policymakers. My son gets 99% and my driver's son sitting in Mandi gets 90%. And they don't have access to coaching. He or she has gone through only school and then still got 90%. Which one is better?
Hands down 90%.
Absolutely. But the measure doesn't count for that. Every single thing that we have is objectively tuned to something saying 99.9 is better than 99.8 and 99.8 is better than 99.7.
Will it ever change? Do you think in our lifetime, will this ever change?
very difficult in a country like India, and that's because there are too many people competing for very few seats, right? Now the answer is not that increase the seats, because then the quality will fall. That's the next question that will come in. Somewhere what happened is we have pushed our children to be in terms of trying to be, or rather, let's put it that way, not children, the parents are more aspirational, that they push their children to something else. For example, let me put things in context. You talked of entrance examinations. Every student who is studying for a coaching, the coaching institution knows that 90% of them don't stand a chance of cracking
at the time of entry only. Yeah.
Or maybe within 6 months when they are sitting in the classroom.
Yeah.
But they continue to tell the student, okay, listen, if you work hard, you'll get there. That's because that is business for them, right? And the parent also believes that maybe he will achieve. There is anecdotal story saying someone got 60% but still cracked an examination, right? So they'll believe in that anecdotal story and not in the larger set of data. When I was studying, Kunal, there were 3 layers within engineering. Let's take engineering, for example, right? There were ITIs, which are all for skilling.
Correct.
And thousands of them across the country.
Yeah.
Then you had polytechnics.
Correct.
And then on top of that, you have engineering colleges.
True.
Right. And everyone tried to fit into these things very clearly.
And progress. From a polytechnic, you can still go to an engineering.
Yeah. Through AEEE and all, right? Now, that layer has been killed by the parents and students because people started selling them an aspiration or selling them hope.
Correct.
Because hope is monetizable.
Correct.
Right. So a student who's capable of getting into ITIs is now getting a seat in BTech.
Correct.
Though the outcome is not the same.
Or could be of an ITI only.
But the student is putting a lot of money into that. And that will continue because we're selling hope, and the parents believe that I should do the best that I can for my child, even if it means that the chances are lesser.
Let's look at that system only, which you speak about the parents. In my view, I still don't blame the parents, and I'll tell you why. Because he doesn't have an option. The poor person who is an aspirational lower middle class, and I think with that GDP of 2,500, the only way he is living his own dream, both the husband and the wife, the father and the mother, is through the child. I didn't get it. They know education is the only tool for the child to grow.
Absolutely.
And when they look around, to your point, right, what I see is a broken state board, right? State to state it differs. I'm sure the peninsular Indian states are much better than perhaps the northern states, right? You have reported that as well. When you look at higher education, again, the peninsular Indian states fare much better than, right? So hence the education system in the peninsular Indian state is much better. Not because the parents demand it, because maybe society as a large wants to do much better, right? In this case, how do we kind of blame the parents for it? Because that's what they are kind of saying.
No, that's what I'm saying. The thing is, we all know that there is something wrong with the system. It can be the way we go about selecting students to get into the primary institutions, or the way we create the curriculum in the state boards.
True.
Or any of those kind of things, right? But what is the solution is something that all of us, there is a lot of difference, right? A lot of people, like I say, we should not have an entrance examination. But a lot of people say that's the only transparent way of getting it done, right? Whereas at my opinion, like you take the state of Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu does a wonderful, wonderful job of the way they conduct. They said TNE is based on the class 12th marks. And class 12th marks is done over a period of 2 years where you
Correct.
keep working on the student, the internals are scored, the exams are scored, the quarterly are scored, everything is scored and everything has a percentage. And then it leads to something else, right? At this point in time, the problem that we have is the entrance exam makes you 0 or 1.
Correct. True.
With nothing in between.
Absolutely.
That is completely wrong because everything that you've done in the school is not worth at all whatsoever,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Now, at some point in time, I remember Kapil Sibal, when he was a HRD minister, tried to work it out saying we'll also give a weightage to the school score because then you don't go and join a coaching factory in a different state and then come back just to crack that examination, right? Maybe that's a way forward, maybe. But there are a lot of people who will also criticize that option because, see, the thing is now at this point in time, everyone seems to be enjoying the monetary gains out of an entrance examination. That's a fact. It's a massive fact, including the government. The government this year would be earning 15,000 crores of GST based on coaching.
So right.
Right. When you have that, they can't give it up. Right? So at every point in time, what I see is that everyone is gaining out of it, and the only person who's paying out of their pockets, out of their noses, is the student and the parent.
And the ultimate loss is the child, because although they have spent so much money, I call them, they're functional, but they're not competent.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because there are no real skills, there's no real learning.
And there is enough and more evidence that the toppers of JEE don't do well at IITs once they join there. Enough and more evidence. Go back and look at all data that is there. The toppers at the JEE level don't really work it out.
But if you see, Mahesh, right until the 80s, the system was far better from where we kind of came
Absolutely,
from.
absolutely.
It was far better. Now, to your point, which you speak about normalization, I think a graduate degree was the norm. And then the university system brings in about a master's and an MBA, right? I think my own institution has a postgraduate kind of a program, but it's more of a gap than something which is like a add-on. And I personally kind of think, and by definition of, let's say, an MBA is business, right? And 99.9% go into services. Is there any incremental value? Then can I look at it and fact, yeah, fair enough. Maybe the poor guy comes from a not so good institution in the undergraduate. Forget transfer of knowledge which exists today any which ways, right? There was nothing really he learned, and maybe in a good institution he gets to learn.
I think we overemphasize good institutions to bad institutions, honestly, right? Like we tell our children, be friends with the topper of the class. We don't tell them to be friends with the richest guy in the class, right?
True.
Generally, right?
True.
We always want our children to be in good company. And the good company is defined by the character, nature, and excellence in terms of merit and all,
Marks.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Now, the thing is, for me, the best college is a college which has all kinds of people and not one kind of people.
So right.
Right. So if you were to give me an institution where rich people go in, I would not let my child go there. And the simple reason is because I don't want him to be a part of that kind of a circle. I would rather make him a part of for example, you look at the law as a space, right? Law, you actually have some very, very good private universities and NLUs.
Correct.
I'll always prefer an NLU to a private university, which is also possibly in all international rankings is the best possible, right? The reason is because I want my child to be amongst all kinds of people so that he learns the worldly traits and worldly knowledge and wisdom.
Pretty much what convent schools were.
At
one point in time.
And Right to Education did that. In schools, you actually have EWS students mixing. The thing is, we need to understand, are we trying to create, machine sort of a people or managers and all? Or are we trying to make them good human beings with empathy and also becoming leaders, have a chance of becoming leaders? That will happen only when you know that the India that we see here is not the India that is there around us.
Correct.
And that will happen when you have poor people coming in who are fighting for the 10 rupees. They can't pay 10 rupees and they still want to survive. So those kind of things are important for our children.
Education is also a state subject, largely driven state, right?
Yeah.
You have state boards, various state boards. You have spoken extensively about China as well, right? And again, one of those episodes, again, opened my eyes. I had read many books on business, but now how the system of education works with one of your videos, which I kind of saw. Take us through what they did right. I'm sure that's a work in progress over there as well. But the fact that there is just that one national exam, regardless of the system that you're kind of coming from, and it's as twice the size of this country, forget the per capita. I'm talking about landmass, same population, almost the same culture. What have they done?
See, I don't think we are in a position to say they've done it right, because Gaokao, that you're talking about, is also a very, very traumatic examination for all the people out there. That's only one single examination and all. But one good thing that happened out of because of Gaokao is that all state syllabus across the country is aligned to that examination.
Exactly.
Right. Whereas in India, only CBSE is aligned to NCERT.
Right. So right.
See, what we have is, we have national institutions. It can be the IITs, NITs, triple ITs, AIMS, IAS, IIMs, NLUs and all this stuff, right? And then you have some very, very good state colleges. You go to any particular state, you will actually find about 10 very good colleges, right? Now, when people want to go for the very good state college versus an institution here, to get here, there is a different syllabus. To get here, there is a different syllabus.
True.
And that is where the dichotomy starts.
True.
That what does the student do? He obviously wants to study at IIT. And assuming he doesn't get into IIT, he still wants to get into the best college within the state. But the syllabus for both are different.
I'll tell you where my dichotomy in my head comes, and this is again, which I wish the powers to be hear this, is the fact that you can't have a 2,500 per capita household income or an individual income, and there is that examination system across, including a CUT. From a state board, the person has to take tuition. The entire industry is about 2 lakhs, 2.5 lakhs, goes to about 8 lakhs, 9. How can you have an industry support an entrance examination where your per capita is only 2,500? It just doesn't make sense.
Not just that. See, you say education is not for profit, but the only way you can get into this national institution is to go through institution for profit, not for schools.
You're absolutely right.
Which is the coaching institution.
Absolutely right.
So, while we talk of this side of it, and the worst thing that I hate in this entire conversation is, right, for example, recently CUET examination, they took a decision that, it will be computer-based test. One is not stopping us from being progressive in terms of thinking through the whole thing, right? We are a nation which says that when there is one voter also, there are a bunch of 5 people who will go with the polling booth and all and voting machine and get that vote out there. And it happens, we always, every election, we actually talk about this one place where the electoral agents and, everyone is walking to just get that one vote.
Absolutely. There's a good movie also on that.
Exactly, right. And then you actually have a computer-based test where you very fully know that 47% of Indian schools don't have a computer in the school. How do you deal with this thing? We basically have never prioritized education. We have never prioritized education.
Why?
That's because it's not our children. We are only dealing with the next 5 years. We're not dealing with the next 20 years. I always say one generation, you just focus only on education. Give up everything but ensure that not 3%, but 15%, 20% of our money is spent only on education.
I'm totally with you on that.
Push it as much as you can. For 25 years, if you do that, one generation, one complete generation, then you have a massive change happening. There is complete equity. Everyone is competing on fairer terms. Everyone is working on equal terms. But then we prioritize so many things along with this that education is deprioritized. Kunal, you go back 15 years, right? There was no service tax. There was no education cess. Now you have education cess which contributes 80,000 crores. You have GST and all on education skilling and all, which might, my opinion, will have between 50,000 to 100,000 crores that is coming in. Because just coaching would be about 10, 12, 15,000 crores. Then you have skilling, certification, name it.
Yeah.
Right. So education has now become a source of revenue for the state.
True.
Which earlier they were giving about 3.5%, they're possibly now taking
back about 8-9%.
Right. Yeah. And that is a challenge for us. We have never prioritized education. Would you, for example, today I pay tax, right? And I pay 30% of the tax. And then on top of that, I have to pay for something that my son has to study, on a skilling basis. I need to pay 18% tax on that. If I want to put him in a good college, I need to pay 18% of the coaching that I offered. There is no end to this entire trauma for a parent. And who's making money in this entire thing?
But still in all of this, 90% of the Indians are excluded.
Excluded, absolutely.
They just cannot afford it.
Absolutely.
Like they just kind of give up.
That's the worst thing that we've done. Entrance exam to begin with is not a fair chance. It doesn't give a fair chance for everyone. If my son getting 99% is compared to my driver's son who's getting 99% in the school that he's studying in, then we're talking of equal terms. Yeah. But you bring them down to
and the school system also needs to be the same. The teachers need to be the same.
Absolutely.
Right? I think everyone knows about this. To the point what you just said, it requires 15, 20 years of this constant push. I think what it needs to happen is, as much as there is infrastructure today in everyone's vocabulary, the ports, the highways, everything.
Absolutely.
Right? The sea links, the train ring. It's in everyone's vocabulary.
Absolutely.
We talk about it every day. The startup culture is in everybody's vocabulary today, at least urban India, right? If not anything.
Absolutely.
I still believe entrepreneur India has been for the last 200 years with those 10 million telewalas and Kwalas, I think brilliant guys. Education needs to come into the vocabulary needs to be given the kind of a status.
Absolutely.
More than anything else in the world.
That's the only way. You see, just because you're the most populous nation, or just because you have the most number of young people in that age group of where you talk about demographic dividend, dividend doesn't accrue.
Yeah.
Nowhere does dividend accrue unless you invest.
Absolutely.
Here we are saying just because we are a populous nation will dividend accrue.
Absolutely.
That's not likely to happen. Unless you invest money on this populous nation, the youngest population, you're not likely to accrue the dividend.
Absolutely right.
And that is a basic premise on which the politicians need to be, always questioned. Every single time you must question them, saying, listen, most populous nation doesn't mean anything if you don't have a productive population of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. And from that kind of perspective, when you kind of look at it, and a couple of my TED Talks, I had to do some kind of a research, and I wanted to have a parallel. So I looked at China, right, in terms of how have they become a manufacturing nation, and it goes back to the fact we were doing it.
The
ITIs and the polytechnics, we were doing it.
Absolutely.
And they continue to do it. That's it.
We stopped investing in them.
We stopped investing in them.
And the other thing is, Kunal, one of the things that people don't realize is we keep talking of how school education is. The best example of success in our public education system is the CBSE, the Kendriya Vidyalayas and the Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalaya. The amount of investment that you have there is very, very minimal, about 30,000-40,000 rupees per student, right? But look at the kind of quality that it produces. With all the private schools around, the CBSE schools take a walk. And they win every single time, the Kendriya Vidyalayas especially.
In your data set, tell me something. The same Kendriya Vidyalaya, do they find themselves toppers, when I say toppers? In the entrance exam?
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
The Kendriya Vidyalayas are a hub because what it does is, even now in most cities and towns, people first try to get into Kendriya Vidyalaya before they get into a private school. Because it's so good. It is so good.
And to the point which you just kind of made, it's a very heterogeneous,
very diverse group of
people.
Absolutely.
And in that learning happens.
Absolutely.
And do you think even today the teachers are highly motivated to advance teaching there?
Absolutely. In Kendriya Vidyalayas, you actually, which is what I say, you actually have a very good example of how things would work while trying to maintain the cost structure as it can be. But somewhere now, because we want to say, like for example, recently I had an argument with a gentleman and they were saying that why should we not increase the fee at IIMs? Very good argument, because he says, listen, when you get into IIMs, you get a 30-40 lakh salary at the end of it. So why should that child be subsidized? A very good argument. But the fault line in the argument is that earlier, some of these people were working with NGOs after getting into IIMs. Some of them were becoming entrepreneurs. When you have an EMI on your head, the only thing that you do is to get into a job. Absolutely. Because you want to pay back the EMI. So while you're educating them, you're restricting the potential of trying to be free and serve the nation, because that's what IIMs were meant to. They were created for that purpose. To ensure that we create leaders, managers and all who will spread across the spectrum. And
equitable. People coming from everywhere. Correct.
And to that extent, in IIMs, you'll never have they would never have a report on social equity. Like the way IITs and AIMS and all have, you would never get such a report from IIMs. Because when you look at that, now you'll realize that about 80% of India doesn't even look at CAT as an examination or to get into IIMs. There's no chance in hell unless you move to a metro,
true,
and then go through that journey. You don't have a chance.
You don't have a chance. Any which is out of syllabus.
Absolutely.
I read somewhere and someone said this very beautifully. We go back independent. He's saying rightfully, wrongfully. In hindsight, you can always connect the dots. He's saying what we did was we did a top-down approach. That means we wanted to make the best IITs and we wanted to be right. But we should have done a bottom-up approach in terms of the Kendriya Vidyalayas. That framework which we did should have happened here. And as much as we did the IPSs, the IASs, they should have been the Indian Teacher Services.
No, in hindsight, there could have been many things that could have been done different. But if you go back to again, because you said we created IITs. No, we also created regional engineering colleges those days, which are the best in each state, which is the best in each city. Go back to the RECs, which are now NITs. No, they were created so that at a regional level.
But it was still,
create
what I was trying to tell you, it was still at a graduate level or a postgraduate level, right? I was talking about the school, like the Kendra Vidyalaya.
Yeah, so there are state government schools which are very, very good. Again, I studied in a state government school. And the thing is, Kunal, you go back to any good CU at this point in time and ask them with their schooling.
They would be all from...
I challenge you that many of them would have gone through somewhere, public education system would have touched them.
You said this very interestingly. I did a podcast with a bunch of 16-year-olds, very tier one. Not their fault. They come from privileged backgrounds, right? They're born into those privileged backgrounds. And I asked, I said, so what are your aspirations after 12? Literally, they were, I would say, talking on behalf of maybe their school, their peers, the families, and everyone after 12th wanted to kind of go abroad.
Absolutely.
I asked them this one question. I said, is it because it's too tough for you to compete with that maid's child for IIT? Yeah. Is it too tough for you to compete for NLU? Is that the reason you're kind of going abroad? Obviously, they meandered around the question, didn't give me an answer, but
which is the case.
Which is the case, right? They cannot compete. And hence the easiest aspect is, let me kind of get into a decent university, which I believe under the holistic education process will take an Indian who's a full paying...
Absolutely.
And 1 in 3 are Indians in any foreign universities.
Absolutely.
But look at who are you competing with over here. There is no chance in hell that aspirational Kendra Vidyalaya coming from a Jharkhand who... it's not the question of ability for rote learning. I think it's the ability to survive, an ability to do something and prove to the parent, that compassion, that determination, you can't compete with them.
See, the hunger for success and the fear of failure is second to none when you go down to the 90% of India.
Yeah.
Right? And both these are missing in the 10% of the schools because they have an alternate option.
Yeah.
And you can't blame the children on the 10%, by the way. See, when your back is to the wall, now you only react one way.
True.
Their back is not to the wall. It's not their problem. It's not their mistake, right? Like I keep saying, we don't send our children by buses. We send our children by cars. So you can't blame them for saying, oh, you never use the public transportation. You never allowed them. Right? You never allowed them to be outside your home after 7 in the evening.
But in K-12, I was born and brought up in Bombay, right? Very, very normal upbringing, lower middle class, I would say, right? Per capita, maybe $150 at that point in time. But there was no stratification in schools. Schools were all the same.
Oh yeah, now they're very clearly divided.
There is a classification in school.
In a particular school, only a similar kind of people.
Absolutely.
So basically what you created is ghettos.
You're creating ghettos. Absolutely. And there are ghettos.
Yeah, absolutely.
In our time, there was no.
So the state government schools is the lowest of the order, where it's a different ghetto as compared to if I may say so, the most elite school where you charge 10 lakh rupees a fees. And by putting the fee itself, it's a filter to create a ghetto.
It's pretty much what happened in the 70s, 80s with Stephens, right?
Absolutely.
Everybody, I think the real intellectuals coming from various parts of India congregated, confluenced in Stephens, and you had kind of success. If you had an opportunity, right, on a one-on-one with the powers to be, what are you going to let them know about? And they've seen your videos, right? The fact that there is absolutely inequity when it comes to entrance exam. It's absolutely inequitable when it comes to even 10th and 12th standard as a board, for the simple reason your child and my child still has access, whether if I'm in Bihar, if I'm rich, or if I'm in Jharkhand, if I'm rich, to tuition, private tuitions, some element of tuition, right? Vis-a-vis a poor child in Salem who has no access to kind of tuitions. Why go to this end exam called 10th? After that, then you have to choose based on your marks. Think about it. So I am really, really good in, let's say, math. For whatever reason, on a particular day, I don't do well, and I have to choose. And this system just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating.
No, I think, see, whatever we do, there'll always be question marks on it. Like, for example, how do you allow a student to make a choice and all those kind of things, right? But the first thing we must understand is that the effort that the child puts in a school must be valued.
True.
Now, it can be in a score, or it can be in extracurricular, or it can be on something else that the child does in the school. But there must be a decent amount of value, not some value. A decent amount of value that has to be attributed to anything that happens in the school, right? When you do that, you actually take away the business that's been created because the schools fail to deliver certain things. Like all the business, for example, every single business opportunity based on it, because of education, if you look at it, is because the belief is that the public education system will fail the student anyway, so they will veer towards the private system, right? It can be coaching because the schools don't fail to align themselves to the examination, right? It can be skilling because you believe that the university will not make them employable, right? It can be training or employability because you believe that certain employability skills or traits are not taught in the university system. So every single business that's been created around education is because the conviction by these founders is that anyway the public education system will fail the children at every single level. Right? Now, if you have to start looking at what's been created as a business on outside and start plugging the same thing, for example, let's look at, the coding skills or whatever tech skills that you have. Don't tell me that in 4 years, what you could not create in a B.Tech degree, someone comes in from outside, adds 6 months to it and makes them employable.
Correct.
In which case, why can't that 6 months be a part of the 4 years?
Absolutely.
If you have to do that, then you're coming up with a system which works, right? A well-oiled machinery which also makes them not just graduates but employable with decent amount of skills. Because the skilling courses that you have is 3 months to 6 months to 9 months at the most, and the program that you have here is 4 years, mind you.
Yeah. Again, if the function of education is the ability to learn, right? Why should there be a score? Because learning is a continuous process.
No, which is right. So there again, the question of who's ahead of the queue will always come in. Kunal, what we fail to recognize is that in everything that we do, a 10 is better than a 9 and a 9 is better than an 8. In our business also, when you and I go and talk, someone who's...
the revenue earning potential.
Exactly.
You earn much more
so anything,
per unit.
you can talk of sports or business or anything. There is always an objective metric that is created. How do we create the objective metric is the only question mark. But objective metric is created. But that is only up to a point. After that, for example, when I see my office here, I don't see what is the score of the person who came in. Within 1-2 years, their performance, their skill sets and how they work with the system will align itself. So this is only up to a point, like all of us were not, I was not a topper in my class, but I'm sitting here. My toppers in my class might be working for me for all that I know, right? So that is never an issue out here. Over a period of time, life will, balance itself out where your hard work, your integrity to work and all those things will have a better score or better pathway for your success as compared to anything else. But here there has to be some measure, some metric, and that...
For sure. See, there's no magic wand in this conversation. I'm just kind of saying if it comes part of the discourse for the next 15, 20 years...
It is happening.
Yeah.
It is happening because if you look at the success that's happening once you come out of the system, it's not necessary that you need to come off from those, hallowed... houses,
backgrounds,
that you'll succeed. The people who are succeeding are people like me also who didn't come from those hallowed houses, right?
But you succeeded despite of education. Was it your personal grit and
No, I succeeded because of education, not despite of education. Because as I said, I did CA, which, like, for example, a lot of people ask me, and one of the questions that people like you also ask me is, why do we need a degree? Why do we need a school? Why do we need physical infrastructure? I did a course where there was no physical infrastructure. CA is a distance learning course if you look at it, right? With a skill being attached when you're doing internship every single day, right? And in India, if you were to look at it, chartered accountancy is the biggest distance learning course in the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? 3%,
and by far the most transparent, and by far I think the best.
Absolutely.
The way it is conducted.
And that's what I did.
Yeah.
So skill was happening at the internship level. What you do, apprenticeship job.
And you just said it. why can't the systems, and you know what, part of my thing was to come to this whole chartered accountancy kind of thing. Why can't it be this apprenticeship based system?
Absolutely. So, which the conversation is moving in that direction when you see some of the NEP things.
So right.
It'll take maybe another every year something is new is happening off late in the last
But
2
you know, my
years.
problem, I'll tell you why. Again, this is where the pessimist side comes. When it comes to execution, right, you're going back to the same people who are mired and shrouded with a past, who don't want to change. Now you have given them a policy which is progressive.
Yeah, but that is territorial. It will change. It's territorial, very territorial case, because everyone wants to be seen as controlling a set of things.
Yeah, $10 trillion. 2047. Everyone knows that this is happening and you can't stop this, right? The only problem that I kind of see is maybe the top 250 million people will take it there, and the remaining maybe 1 billion people will get the benefit of it, but they won't be part of that.
Kunal, again, it all starts
Equity.
because when you actually have scarce resources or scarce supply side, let's put it that way, and all these people are moving towards that. You try to increase the supply by actually putting in more money and not just increasing supply.
Correct.
These things will get evened out.
Yeah.
This will get sorted out, right? The thing that you need to be, for example, some of the universities in India are need blind, which means that you get through the entrance examination, your financial ability doesn't determine whether you come in or not.
Beautiful.
And you call them need blind universities. So if you have your own thing, IHS, there's a filter that you put saying that you don't ask what the ability of the financial ability of this child. You say this child is good, and then he comes in and says, listen, but I can't come in because I can't pay the fee. You enable the whole thing to happen, right? Increasingly, a few universities are coming up which are need blind.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I have taken, I would say, cue from everybody.
Yeah.
I'm a product of, I learn from you, I learn from Ashoka, I learn from whosoever it is, and especially on the need blind. And you will be surprised. There are people, and these are people in the background who are giving back. Either they're giving back their CSR money, they're giving back their family office philanthropic fund.
And by the way, people who come through this route are so hungry for success that their integrity at work is 10 notches above anyone else.
Absolutely. So, if you look at it at some stage to the point, the fact that yes, the IIM, IITs, everything needs to be subsidized. I also think good private universities need to go, let's say, the Ashoka route.
It is happening.
It is happening. The ability to raise funds should be one of the priority for the trustees.
Absolutely. It is by the way, it's happening at a school level also, right? I remember, of course, now this government hasn't taken it up, but 15 years back I was a part of a policy that was being created by the then government, 12 years back, whatever, where they said the land will come from the state government, the money will come from the entrepreneur, one person, with a naming rights for the school. Yeah. And 1/3 of the school's supply would be coming from the government at a fixed price, which is what they spend for CBSE students per average student, right? So what you have is you actually are setting up a school in districts where you don't have a school, where the land is coming from the government or the state government. They identify the state. I put in 5 crore rupees as the initial investment to create the infrastructure. 1/3 of the students come from the government through a common council, right? 2/3 you can get your own, but the fee has to be exactly the same. It's just that is completely given by the government. This is given by the students, right? And you run a school based on the norms that the government sets up across the country. And the proposals, received was so humongous. The big corporates wanted to take 500 schools, 1,000 schools and all on this format, on this model, where fee is regulated, syllabus is regulated, curriculum is regulated, but they still wanted to be a part of it. So there is enough money, if you want to give them space and freedom, there is enough money that will come into the space.
But do you think it is very tightly controlled? Anything aside, one side, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. I'll cite an example as well. So I think in one of the largest states, either I'm recounting one thing what you had kind of mentioned, or this is something which I read somewhere. The fact that the matrix on that school, after having all the computers, was how many computers are working, not how many students have learned from the computers. So when the power corridors, you percolate it down, right, to the end usage, the usage is not competency. Not how many people have learned, to your point, right? So are my computers working?
Kunal, that is nuances, right? I get your point.
But that's at a scale.
Which you're right, absolutely right. At some point in time, you need to talk of that. But then at some point in time, if you correlate, you'll always see schools with computers performing better than schools which don't have computers.
Correct.
Right.
Of course, I'm not saying that. But the fact that the state machinery, who has subsidized the computers, the matrix on that headmaster is how many computers are functional.
Absolutely.
Vis-a-vis, you know what?
No.
Did 100% of the people learn the language?
These are corrections that have to be made.
But at a mass scale.
Absolutely.
2025 हो गया है.
Yeah.
मतलब कैसे बनेंगे?
No, these are corrections.
Yeah.
Again, the thing is, see, as a policy maker, first of all, I have to say, I have so many schools of which so many don't.
Policy ने तो policy बना दी. अब ये execution की problem है. So to the point, I go back to what you said, and if I give you your view, Mahesh, you said that you're not an activist, and this should be the norm. But this is not the norm. One has to be an activist. One has to be an activist for the next 15 years, and keep on talking about it.
No, that's all we can do.
Yeah.
See, again, one is a rant, two is an informed opinion.
So right.
I don't believe in rant because I wake up with a lot of frustration.
I get it.
Then you deal with these things, right? But ultimately, when you want to talk to a larger populace, you need to be logical, reasonable,
for sure,
and push a lot of information, saying this is what
unbiased information,
absolutely,
transparent information,
and for the good of the people of the country, right? And if you do that, at some point it will rub off. It will get ingested. It will get injected, and then people will start taking a conversation.
Go back 17 years, Mahesh. Is that why you started Careers 360? This whole aspect about transparent career, student guidance to the most vulnerable section of society.
Yes, for sure. There is no two ways about it, right? See, I was at Outlook and I wanted to leave Outlook at, about 12, 14 years back actually. And I had three options. Create another news platform, which I didn't want to because Outlook was my baby and I would never create anything to compete with them, right? And then anything that Outlook has created, I would not want to create anything.
And what journalism, in the 90s, and amazing journalism, and look at some of the stalwarts which came from that system.
So the DNA that I have is from Outlook, that I call a spade a spade. I'm honest. A lot of people think it is activism, but it was honest journalism. You call a spade, and that's what it is. So you're not trying to sugarcoat the whole thing, and be firmly founded on an unbiased but blunt to the point coverage.
Correct. You wanted to get that into education?
Absolutely.
Hence 360?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. There is no two opinions of it that, I wanted to create a honest, transparent, calling a spade kind of a journalism.
In a sector which was highly, let's just put it this way, politicized, right? In a sector which was, despite the Institute of Eminences, they moved the 30 out, right? Well, it's continues to still be shrouded in a lot of...
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. See, what happens is, Kunal, some of these people, they try to force you or bully you because they think they can. But with me, it doesn't work because they know that I don't give in. So now that people have stopped trying also, of trying to bully me. Initially, they used to try saying, oh, this is a young chap.
If you have to measure your own impact of the last 17 years on India, right, through Careers 360, what would that be? How have you changed the discourse, perception?
So people increasingly now, like 17 years or 15 years back, people were going by the handouts given by the institutions. Now they talk of students. So they also go and talk to the students. Earlier they were only going and talking to the institution, right? Today they talk of affordability, access to education, transparency, equity, fairness and all. Earlier they were just reporting what used to come. Right. So now you actually analyze the thing also. Today there is not a single publication in the country, not a single TV channel in the country where you don't have an education beat. 15 years back there was never an
any education beat.
So in a sense,
but I think you're beating more on education than all the channels put together.
That's okay.
Which is a brilliant thing.
In fact, I proudly say this: the news coverage on Careers 360 can be a wire service for the entire country.
I totally agree with you.
In terms of how we cover education.
Absolutely.
It's a proper wire service. Anyone can take it and it will be better than what you see in PTI and ANA and anyone.
Totally agree. Absolutely. And honest and kind of...
Absolutely.
To the point what you just kind of mentioned, right? This aspect about you keeping yourself motivated every day to put that information out there. Now, look at institutions for the last 40, 50, 60 years. Take BITS Pilani, and you've covered BITS. How have they maintained to be so consistent and on an innovation scale rising? And correct me if I'm wrong, and this is something you need to let me know. I believe it is at par with a fantastic IIM.
Oh yes, with IITs, with IITs.
Sorry,
Right,
IITs. Yeah.
See, BITS Pilani is as good as IITs, and it is far better than, if you remove the top 3-4
Top
IITs.
3-4 IITs.
It is better than the other IITs also. Like today morning, I was reading one of those things that the BITS Pilani was doing, and I was so amazed about the whole thing. They're now going around the world collecting, alumni donations.
Yes.
Right. And they're doing it very, very well at this point in time. They're doing it far better than any of the IITs that you see around the thing, right? So the wish to give back to the institution is coming from the BITS Pilani alumni far better than possibly the IITs.
You're so right. Yeah.
Right. So, and why did you want to give back when you know that your money is going to go for the right use?
Correct.
Right. This year, BITS Pilani, I'm told, has given 70 students complete free ship or some kind of scholarship to enable them to come in, right? And they want to make it need blind, which means that when a student marks, gets into the score and gets a seat, he or she will come in, irrespective of the ability, financial ability of the child. That is what it is. So once you create that kind of a structure where the people who can afford to pay are paying and people who can't afford to pay, the institution is taking care of it.
But 40, 50 years, what is that model of an education? If people have to emulate a BITS, and I'm sure there are 10 others, right? We're just taking BITS. What have they done consistently, right? Can that model be put into K-12? Can that model put into...
yes, for
and
sure.
what is that? Is just the passion of giving, of teaching, of facilitating, of learning, of innovation? What is it?
No. The simple thing that they did was, it's not a simple thing. Of course, there was, it had the support of the Birlas, but more importantly, Birlas did not interfere in the institution. They left it to the academics to deal with that. So it was not a business proposition or a proposition where the Birlas wanted to control it so that they are seen as the benefactors of the whole thing.
So two things what I'm kind of hearing from you. One is, of course, the promoters, right?
Birlas had money and these people...
And they wanted to build.
Exactly.
Tatas have built the TIS,
Absolutely.
right? Absolutely. So it's the promoter family who really want to give back. And then
but we're not involved with the management.
We're not involved with. And then you have the management who really want to excel.
So because they got the freedom. So the Birlas hired the right kind of people initially to set the DNA in place.
So the playbook exists. It's just the execution. You take the same playbook of 20 years, our children, if we need to dominate the world, and why shouldn't we?
Absolutely.
Why shouldn't we dominate the world?
Absolutely.
The route to that domination is through education.
Absolutely.
Equitable education.
Absolutely.
Ban goddamn these entrance exams. Have some other matrix, or I don't know whether the Gaokao is a better system. I don't know. I'm not an expert.
No, even if you have an entrance exam, align it to the state
But
syllabus.
it can't be that every college has its own entrance exam.
Exactly,
Then, you have completely diminished 10th and 12th.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're just suddenly telling the world, please, this is all ridiculous.
Get some value back into the school. If there is something wrong with your schooling system because of which you can't take that score for that, then change the schooling system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then impose something on top.
Yeah, so right. Where do you think the next 5 years career takes you? Where do you want to take this? Do you want to hit hard more on issues which people are not kind of talking about, and force people to think? Someone said it very beautifully. He's saying, do you know your customer? I said, yeah. Consumer has remained a consumer, has remained a consumer. Sometimes you just have to steer them in a direction which they haven't seen. Is there where you're taking Careers 360?
So, Kunal, I don't believe that only Careers 360 can make this change, right? What I do every single day, what we do every single day is to seed in the right kind of questions that everyone in the media keeps asking the same question.
Correct.
Right? Some of the stuff that you're talking about is because you read me, right? And some of those, if you now notice around, some of the stuff that everyone talks about is because we seed in that information.
True.
And that information is used by those people. Like when the NEET fiasco happened, we put in the data out saying that you can't have 7 toppers from one city without names and those kind of things. And it went on to the next level and the next level and the next level, right? The important thing is the education beat at this point in time not everyone is as informed as possibly we are, because we're only dealing with that, mind you. Whereas there is one single reporter who's trying to understand the whole thing, right? So today, essentially what we do is to create a body of work which is used by everyone in the country to start questioning, to start asking the right questions, to start analyzing, and to start pushing the governments of the day to...
That's exactly what you did with journalism as well.
Absolutely.
That's exactly. And it took some time. But tell me something, when people like you, and I say it with so much regard, when you moved away, look where it is today.
I'm not getting there. See, I think everyone... I don't want to judge...
No, I'm not judgmental. I'm just, as a consumer, I'm also a citizen of this country, right?
Right. So the thing is this, what is right for me is right for me. What is right for someone else is right for someone else, right?
But what is universally right of the true journalism?
I'm not the right person to judge whether I'm universal right or not. It is the
that's more philosophical. But what I'm trying to say is that the essence of anything out there is, if something is happening, you're just putting the facts out there for you to decide.
Absolutely.
I'm no one to give my views.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Even in education, what we are kind of doing, I am putting the facts out there for you to decide. It's just that the way I'm processing, I'm putting out there. You can shut me down. And you have that democratic power to just shut me down. Or perhaps you may just think about it and form your own opinions. I think education, this is what is required in the next 15-20 years.
No, it will keep happening, Kunal. Increasingly, people realize that the kind of questions we raise, if they don't raise, they'll fall apart.
Yeah.
Because there is one thing that is very strong about education, that you report something wrong, people will go after you.
Yeah.
Because it's affecting people at a scale, right?
It is that emotional anchor of that Indian.
Absolutely.
Everything aside, this in their mind is, you can't erase it, right? Yeah. It's built on the foundation of...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I always wonder why some of these political parties don't take it up the way it should be. They talk of jobs, which is at the next level.
Yeah.
But you promised free education, you got it going.
True.
You promised free education, you got it going completely. And
बाद में give free bus services.
No, free education, and you talk of and it starts by saying not 3.5%, but 10%.
Correct. And of course, there will be the cynics who saying, where are the resources coming from? Figure out a way.
Well, 7%
for the government.
See, it's like this, Kunal. And I get agitated when I talk about this. All of us as parents, right, when it comes to our children, we spend 20-25% of our income on their education.
Absolutely.
Right? But when we become policymakers, we spend 3%.
Correct.
Because they're not our children.
Correct. And they still continue to...
other requirements for that money.
But again, the same way, apart from whoever you are, you still have to run Careers 360, right?
Absolutely.
If you have a problem, you will figure out a way.
I'll figure out a way.
You'll figure out a way.
Yeah.
Tomorrow your revenues and expenses don't match. You have to figure out a way.
I'll figure out a way.
So my suggestion is, go and figure out a way. You are there. I am figuring out a way to ensure that I am more equitable.
Absolutely.
Right? In my own small way.
Yeah.
From that perspective. This is so interesting. And I said at the very beginning that the conversation will meander in a way, if it allows just people, and we're steering them to a direction for them to kind of think. I think every Indian deserves honest to happy and monetize and be rich.
Absolutely.
Why shouldn't we?
Absolutely.
Everyone.
All our richness is the wealth of the nation in a certain sense.
It is, right?
Absolutely. So
the fact that your ability to afford health, ability to afford education, ability to afford a good condominium, everybody. Absolutely. And why? It's not the domain of China. It's definitely not the domain of Europe. It's not the domain. It is our domain.
Absolutely.
And the root is through education, in my opinion.
That's the only way.
I'll come to my last segment, from that perspective. If I had to ask you, if you had to reimagine education for the next 2 decades, right? Mm-hmm. You take any segment. You take the K-12 segment, or perhaps you take the graduation segment. How would that be? And I'll tell you my view.
Come again, sorry?
If you had to reimagine the education, right, through the NAP, through the policy, whichever way, either in the K-12 segment or in the higher education segment, right? How would you just change it? Just imagine you become an authoritarian for about a decade? How would that be?
So we'll ensure that at school level, education is there for everyone, exactly the same way it is for everyone.
Absolutely.
Right. And whatever it takes to create that,
Whatever
what
it
is
takes
the
to
kind of thing, I will do that.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking of the infra facilities,
I
I'm talking of
understand.
the education. So the quality of teachers and those kind of things, right?
Your desk could be different than mine, but my quality is exactly the same.
Exactly the same, right? That's the first part of it at school level. After that, you let them go through the graduation level where students have an option of choosing the streams, pathways and all. And also create layers so that at every point there's an exit, which is what NEP talks
Which
of, by the
NEP
way.
talks about.
Okay, after 1 year also there's an exit, after 2 years also exit, and then you come back and finish the whole thing. By the way, there is the academic bank of credits is going to do that in a certain sense, because everything skill that you have is a credit that is in a bank, and over a period of time you stitch in everything and become a graduate kind of a thing. So if I were to do these things, reform the school education where it is valued and it's exactly the same for all the kind of students. By the way, when I say exactly the same, I'm saying at a subject level, not in terms at the quality level, not in terms of everyone becoming a robo of each other kind of thing, everyone becoming a clone of each other. Then I think you got something going. Like for example, STEM is the easiest place for you to make it exactly the same for everyone, because science is the same for everyone.
You're so right.
Maths is the same for
There's
everyone.
no speculation.
There is no speculation there, right?
Yeah.
History and culture and all, there might be some differences.
Absolutely. Your interpretation is different.
Yeah,
to mine.
exactly.
Yeah.
But STEM is just easy go for you. Start with that.
Yeah. You know what I would kind of also do? And I've been thinking about it quite a lot. One is the fact that at the end of the day, it's the state. And the head of that state, his portfolio should be education.
Absolutely.
He's the chief administrator of education. And matrix on him, because he will be the one who will kind of put this up. And it requires that push from down. And to your point, and also I wish there were about 50, 60 of us, maybe 1,000 of us who are talking about it. And again, not criticizing anybody. I don't think so. India needs critical people, but what India requires are essentially conversations in a positive way, I would say, from that perspective. Career 360 in the next 10 years, according to you, right? I'm sure you look that far ahead, if not 10, 5 for sure. Where do you think, because everything around us changes, right? We were talking off the record about the agentic AIs, and I asked you, do you think it's 2 years away? And you said it's actually, Kunal, is about 6 months away. And I saw that one of your tweets, which you had kind of put then about agentic AI. Can you give us your view on what's happening?
See, what's happening is with AI, much of what you would get freshers do for you, the AI can do far better than that, right? For example, you hire someone who coordinates with 100 of your customers.
Correct.
By sending them mails and those kind of things. And agentic AI will do that better with quality. You have a bunch of people who are calling up customers. And agentic AI will do better because the calls will go and exactly it will have.
And you have seen the demos of this happening.
Absolutely. And it will only improve. Within 6 months we got something going. So it will improve dramatically, right? So some of the first layer of work that you have would be replaced or will become replaceable. Whether you replace it or not is a different thing altogether, right? There might be some kind of people who will say, no, I want to speak to a human being and not a robot. All those things will happen, but you will actually see a lot of this stuff taken away. So the BPO work that you have,
the repetitive, customer facing,
it'll at a first layer it will get replaced
and
for sure.
almost zero margin of error.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
right. So once you do that, then you're dealing with the next level of the thing. So if you're trying to be an army of people, the army is not needed. You just need to find a way of differentiating yourself.
Yeah, and and it's so relevant what you're kind of saying, and hence I say, it's when we say made for India, made for the world, I'm talking human capital.
Yeah.
And so what if they go to the Middle East? So what if they go to the European? I am super happy if you are the managing director or even an assistant manager of a Siemens sitting in Germany, Munich, and guiding their policy decision. Well, that's an Indian. You see, there has to be of a stamp of an Indian, right? Or a code of an Indian, or a nut of an Indian, or a drivership of an Indian everywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
And that's the only way through knowledge we'll be able to expand.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Such a joy and a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for
No,
having
seriously,
me over.
thank you for giving me the time. And hopefully for our audience, as I said, we are not giving gyan, but the fact that if this discourse can take them to a different direction and start thinking about more, I think they will demand much more, and that's where revolution happens.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Thanks
much, and
My pleasure.
God bless.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Please watch this episode on YouTube. The entire episode is also available on Spotify. We are working on other platforms as well. Give us your feedback. It's extremely important. Engage with us. Help me become a better podcaster. All I can say, I hope the questions that I ask is something you would have asked the guest. Thank you so much.